HBO just adapted the most quietly subversive story George R.R. Martin has ever written, and almost nobody watching has clocked what it's actually about. It is not talking about Easter egg. I am not talking about which Targaryen is whose great uncle. I'm talking about the argument underneath this story, the thing Martin spent 3 slim novellas building, the reason he kept writing them when he was supposed to be finishing Winds of Winter, and whether the show, as charming as it is, actually preserved it. Spoiler, it did not entirely, and the place it broke isn't where you'd expect. This is Inksight. What even is this story? If you've only ever watched Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is going to feel like a tonal whiplash. Half-hour episodes, no dragons, no thrones, a jousting tournament instead of a war. That's not a budget choice, that's the source material. The show is adapted from the first of George R.R. Martin's Tales of Dunk and Egg, 3 novellas published between 1998 and 2010, set roughly 90 years before Game of Thrones. The titles in order: The Hedge Knight, The Swan Sword, The Mystery Knight. Season 1 only covered the first one. Season 2, already green light, will be The Swan Sword. The premise is almost embarrassing simple. A massive, kind-hearted, semi-illiterate hedge knight named Sir Duncan, the tall Dunk, picks up a bad 9-year-old square named Egg. They wonder what stirs. Things happen to them. They learn things. What you need to understand is how unlike the main saga these stories are. A Song of Ice and Fire is a 1,000-page political dogpile with 12 point-of-view characters and a continent-wide war. Dunk and Egg is one man, one boy, one road. The first novella fits in your back pocket. You can read it in an afternoon. And here is the thing nobody talks about. Martin keeps coming back to this story instead of finishing the main series. He keeps pausing the Dragon Apocalypse to write about the Hedge Knight nobody important. Why? That's the question this video is actually about. Because if you can answer why Martin keeps writing Dunk and Egg, you can finally see what he's actually been doing this whole time. And you can also see pretty clearly what HBO's adaptation gets right, and the one specific place it quietly breaks. Let's start with the books. The books, what Martin was really doing. Here is the cleanest way to describe Martin's project across his entire career. He is obsessed with the gap between what a story tells you the world is and what the world actually is. In A Song of Ice and Fire, that gap is enormous. The song says a true king will come. The map says honor is a virtue. The actual word chews up Eddard Stark in the first book and spit out his head. But The Song of Ice and Fire is too big to make that argument cleanly. There's too much going on. Too many factions, too many prophecies, too many plots. The thesis gets buried under the spectacle. So Martin wrote a smaller story. And in that smaller story, he could say the thing he actually wanted to say. That thing is this: knighthood is a lie that some people choose to live as if it were true. That's it. That's the whole project of Dunk and Egg. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Look at how Martin builds Dunk. He's enormous. He's slow. He's not particularly bright. Martin is very careful about this. Dunk genuinely cannot read most of the time. He gets confused in conversations. He forgets the names of houses. He is described more than once as thick-headed. And yet he believes, with his whole chest, in the chivalric code, the 7 virtues, the protection of the weak, the duty of a knight. He believes it the way a child believes in their father. He believes it because his dead mentor, Sir Harlan, told him to, and Sir Harlan was the only good thing that ever happened to him. This is the literary trick of the entire series. Dunk's naivety is the lens, because Dunk believes the songs are true. The world has to keep showing him and us that they aren't. Every time someone behaves dishonorably, Dunk is genuinely surprised, and every time he's surprised, Martin gets to crack open the gap between the ideal and the real, and let the reader peer inside. Now, contrast this with the way honor works in the main saga. In A Song of Ice and Fire, honor is a thing that gets characters killed. Ned dies for it, Robb dies for it. The narrative punishes honor. But in Dunk and Egg, honor is something stranger. It is a thing Dunk chooses every single time, in full knowledge that it might cost him. The trial of 7 in The Hedge Knight is the cleanest example. He could walk away. Nobody important would care. A prince has assaulted a puppeteer girl, and Dunk, penniless, friendless, with no claim on her, chooses to fight a literary Targaryen prince with no realistic chance of winning. Because if he doesn't, the songs aren't true. This is the move. This is the entire move. Martin is asking, what if a knight is just someone who decides to behave as if knighthood were real? What if it's not a title, or a station, or a piece of paper from a king? What if it is a daily, costly, frequently stupid choice? That question doesn't fit in a song of ice and fire. The book is too crowded. There's a war on. Dragons are coming. So Martin wrote it in the margins. He wrote it small, on purpose, because the argument requires smallness to be visible. And then there's Egg. Egg is the other half of the engine. Aegon Targaryen, fourth son of a fourth son, eventual King Aegon V, is, when he met him, a 9-year-old prince who has run away from his palace because he doesn't want to be what his family is. He attaches himself to Dunk specifically because Dunk is everything his family isn't. Dunk is poor, Dunk is honest, Dunk is kind, which in House Targaryen is roughly as common as left-handedness in a goldfish. The whole arc of the series, across all 3 novellas, and presumably the 7 Martin still wants to write, is Egg's learning, slowly, painfully, what his family actually is, and deciding what he wants to be in light of that. He becomes king eventually. We know how it ends. He dies in fire at Summerhall, trying to bring dragons back. The smallness of this book is in conversation with that ending the entire time. So when we talk about adapting Dunk and Egg, we are not talking about adapting a fun side story. We are talking about adapting the cleanest statement of Martin's actual thesis. This is the boiled down version of what he's been arguing his whole career. The question is, did HBO know that? What HBO did and what it means? I'm going to say something that's going to surprise you. Given how this video opened, the show is good. The show is, in many ways, more faithful to Martin's intent than I expected. Let me lay out what it gets right, because this part isn't a complaint section. This part is necessary to set up the actual problem. Choice 1. The scale. This is the most important thing to understand about the show. HBO did not turn this into spectacle. They could have. They had every commercial reason to. House of the Dragon trained the audience to expect dragons and operative civil war. And the easiest way to monetize the Game of Thrones would have been to make every Westeros project bigger than the last. They didn't. The episodes are roughly half an hour. The entire season takes place mostly in and around a single tournament. There are no battles for the realm. There are no dragons. The score holds back. The cinematography stays at eye level, at us level, at Hedge Knight level. Critics have specifically singled out the show's restraint as its biggest virtue, and they are right. That decision alone tells you the showrunners read the books correctly. Bigger would have killed it. They didn't go bigger. Choice 2. Casting. Peter Clefairy as Dunk is, frankly, perfect. He is enormous. He is not conventionally handsome in the way TV usually demands of leads. He plays thick-headed but pure of heart without ever winking at the camera, which is the hardest possible thing to do with a character like this. And Dexter Saul Ansel as Egg, a child actor playing a child who is also secretly a prince and also secretly carrying his entire dynasty future on his back, pulls off something I genuinely didn't think a kid that age could do. The casting nailed the engine. Choice 3. The central relationship. The Dunk and Egg dynamic is the entire reason the books work, and the show preserved it. The bickering, the slowly building affection, the way Egg adopts Dunk and Dunk does not realize this for several episodes. It's out there. Choice 4. The Trial of 7. The set piece of the Hedge Knight is on screen and it lands. The class consciousness is there. The honor versus survivor tension is there. They didn't flinch from the moment that defines Dunk as a character. So far, so good. This is a faithful, lovingly made adaptation of a beloved set of novellas. If I stop the video here, I'll be lying to you about what the video is, because there are in fact places where the show makes specific creative choices that subtly and I think unintentionally shift the meaning of the story Martin was telling. Let me walk you through it. The first and the smallest, the externalization problem. Martin's prose voice in Dunk and Egg is doing an enormous amount of invisible work. The whole series is told in tight third person attached to Dunk. We are inside his head, and inside his head, he is constantly unsure. He second guesses himself. He worries he's not really a knight. He suspects in moments that everyone around him knows he's a fraud. The books work because we hear that voice underneath everything Dunk does. You can't film a voice, so the show has to do something with all that interior doubt, and what he does mostly is externalize it. Other characters voice it. Lionel Baratheon teases Dunk for not knowing things. Aeron sneers at his class. The show shows Dunk being uncertain in glances and pauses, rather than letting us hear him think it. This works. It's good craft, but it shifts something. In the books, Dunk's doubt is his. It is private. It is his daily companion, and the entire moral weight of his choices is that he chooses honor despite that integral undertone. In the show, the doubt becomes more sensational, more about what other people are doing to him. The cost of his choices feels external rather than internal. This is small. I want to be honest, this is small, but it stacks. The second larger choice, the supporting cast inflation. The novella, The Hedge Knight, is genuinely lean. Most named characters get a few lines. The story is built around 3 or 4 real relationships and a tournament. The show, even at its restrained pace, expands. Leonel Baratheon, the Laughing-Storm, gets significantly more screen time and personality than the page gives him. Aerion gets more menace, more build-up. Various Ashfords and Tyras circulate in ways the novella doesn't really need them to. The show is still small, but it's small with a fuller cast. This is a totally defensible TV choice. You need recurring faces for an ensemble to feel alive on screen. Books don't have to do this, shows kind of do. But here's what it costs: the loneliness of the road. In the books, Dunk and Egg are alone most of the time. The world is largely indifferent to them. When they do encounter other people, those encounters feel like real interruptions of an essentially solitary life. The show, by populating the world more densely, makes Dunk's life feel social, chosen, networked. He has friends. Dunk having friends is a different story than Dunk being alone. Both are good stories. They are not the same story. The third, and the one I want to spend the most time on, the ending. This is where the show makes a specific change that I think matters more than it appears to. In the novella, after the trial of 7, Prince Maker, Egg's father, comes to collect his son. Dunk argues on principle that Egg should not be trained in a palace. Egg should learn what Westeros actually is by riding it as Hedge Knight Square, and crucially, Mercer agrees. The book ends with a parental authority figure looking at this big, broke, decent man and concluding, "Yes, you are right. Take my son." The show changes this. In the show, Maker refuses. Egg subsequently lies, tells Dunk that his father has ordered him to keep squaring. And in the season's final mid-credit bit, we learn Mercer is searching for his son. Egg has run away. Egg has deceived Dunk to get what he wants. I get why they did this. It's a cliffhanger. It sets tension for season 2. It makes Eggs more active, more agentic, less of a passive child being shepherded around. But think about what it changes thematically. In the book, the ending is a small, quiet endorsement of Dunk's whole worldview. A Targaryen, a man whose family is built on the idea that they are different, separate, above, concedes to a Hedge Knight's argument about how a prince should be raised. It is Martin's cleanest statement that Dunk's stubborn, clumsy, honest belief in what knighthood means actually changes the world. The system flexes around him just a little. The light of knighthood becomes in that moment slightly more true because Dunk lived as if it were. In the show, that bit is gone. Instead, what we get is a deception. Egg gets what he wants by lying. The Targaryen family stays unchanged. Mercer goes looking for him in anger. The relationship between Dunk and Egg now sits on a foundation Egg has put there through a small act of dishonor. That's a different story. That's a story about a child who is already at 9, learning to manipulate situations to get what he needs. That's a story about Dunk being deceived by the boys trying to protect. And it's a story in which Dunk's worldview has not been validated by the world. It's been bypassed. The show is now a story about 2 people whose bond is built partly on a lie. The book was a story about 2 people whose bond was endorsed, improbably, miraculously, by the very system that should have rejected it. Those are different stories. The literary lens. What this adaptation actually argues. Here's the part where I think Inksight earned its name, because this is a read I haven't seen anywhere else. Every adaptation makes an argument about the work it's adapting. That argument is never spoken aloud. It lives in the choices. What gets cut, what gets expanded, what gets rearranged, what gets invented. Add up the choices and you can read off like a fingerprint what the adaptation thinks the source material is. Let's do that for A Knight of the Seven Kingdom. The show clearly thinks the source material is a charming, character-driven story about an unlikely friendship between a humble knight and a hidden prince, set in a low-stakes corner of a famous world suitable for a half-hour weekly format. That is, let me be precise about this, not wrong. It's just incomplete. What the show seems to not think about the source material is Martin's most direct argument about the moral function of honor in a corrupt world, which depends on the knight's belief structure being internal, lonely, and ultimately validated by an authority that should reject it. I don't think anybody in the writer's room read the book and said, let's strip out the literary thesis. That's not what happens in adaptation. What happens is subtler. A choice gets made for a TV reason. Externalize the doubt because we can't film a voice. Expand the cast because shows need recurring faces. Change the ending because we need a cliffhanger. Each choice is sound. The thesis dies of 1,000 defensible cuts. This is the outlier principle in action. Martin wrote Dunk and Egg as a small case that makes the big argument. The smallness was load-bearing. The privacy of Dunk's doubt was load-bearing. The endorsement at the ending was load-bearing. The show keeps the smallness. It mostly keeps the privacy. It does not keep the endorsement. So what we get is a faithful adaptation that has almost imperceptibly softened the argument, not by making it bigger or louder. The show is admirably quiet, but by making Egg complicit in the central deception, the show transforms Dunk's story from honor improbably works into honor is sweet, but the world gets around it. Those are both perfectly good things to say about Westeros. The second one is, in fact, the Game of Thrones thesis. It is the thing the franchise has been saying for 15 years. What was special about Dunk and Egg? What made Martin keep returning to it instead of finishing his epic was that it was the one place in the saga where he allowed himself to argue for the opposite. That sometimes, on a small enough scale, on a quiet enough road, with the right person in front of you, the songs can be true. The show isn't sure he believes that. The show is edging. And that edge, as small as it is the kind I cannot stop thinking about. The verdict, my honest take. Let me land this clearly, because this is not a hit piece, and I don't want it read as one. What the show absolutely gets right, the scale, the casting, the tone, the choice not to chase spectacle, the central relationship, and the willingness, rare in this franchise, to let a story breathe at half-hour length without padding it into prestige bloat. A Knight of the Seven Kingdom is, by a large margin, the best handled adaptation of any Martin material since Game of Thrones Season 4. That's not nothing, that's a lot. What the show fundamentally misses. Martin's argument that knighthood is a chosen lie, that occasionally, improbably, beautifully gets validated by the world. By turning the ending into a deception and a chase, the show keeps the texture of the book and loses the thesis. It is an extraordinary adaptation of the plot. It is a more cautious adaptation of the meaning. Why this matters for adaptation in general? Because most adaptations fail loudly. Wrong casting, wrong scale, wrong tone. And we know how to talk about those failures. This one fails quietly, in places that are hard to point at. It is the kind of failure that only shows up if you read the book closely and then ask after the credits roll, what did this story actually just say to me? The answer is something slightly different from what the book said. Slightly, but slightly is the entire ballgame in a story this small. The thing about loving an adaptation of something you love is that the thing you have to be most careful of is the version that gets most of it right, because that's the version that quietly replaces original in the cultural memory. So here's what I want you to tell me in the comments. Do you think HBO understand what Martin was actually saying? Or the very faithfulness of this adaptation, its restraint, its loveliness, its half-hour modesty, give them cover to soften the one thing the book refused to soften? I genuinely want to know. The comment with the best argument is the one I'm pinning. If the kind of read you want more of, the argument under the story, not the recap of the story, subscribe.